Hello and welcome to Binge of the Week. I'm Sonia, aka Binge of the Week. Today's episode is Ready or Not, Here Comes the Bride. Not my best work, I think, but it was really hard to come up with a title for this, and I don't know why. So in this episode, we're covering Ready or Not and Ready or Not 2. I believe it was Ready or Not 2, Here I Come was the full title. I should start off probably by saying spoiler alert, because it surprises me sometimes people tune in and they don't know that I'm going to spoil everything, but I am going to spoil everything. I thought about holding back on this episode because Ready or Not 2 is not yet on regular streaming. It is out on PVOD, but I figure this episode will be out there when it comes out in probably a few weeks. I adore both of these movies. I cannot actually pick a favorite between the two. I'm just going to call it a tie. And I actually want to start off this whole thing with putting into context my relationship with horror and my thoughts on horror. I am not a big horror person. I probably years ago would have said, I like most things, but not horror. That's not necessarily true, though. I love certain kinds of horror, and I think, in my opinion, and I know some people hardcore disagree with me, horror isn't a genre. At least not how I was taught what genres were. When I took my film studies courses, I was taught that genres had to have rules. And I really like that framing. I like genres like westerns and noirs, things that have to have certain aspects that makes them a part of that genre. And the reason I say horror is not a genre, it's more like a category that encapsulates a lot of genres, is because it's really meant to scare, to me. Feel free to correct me. It's just like how comedy meant to laugh. Even drama, to me, not a genre. None of these are genres. These are just types of movies and shows and storytelling. And within them, they have genres that actually have structure and rules around what makes something part of that genre. So it's interesting because I think comedy horror could almost be a genre. I don't know what the rules would be, so I'm not going to die on that hill. You know, I do have hills I die on. Like, my most infamous one, I think, is Jurassic Park is a horror, is my favorite hill to die on. It is a monster movie. It is also sci-fi. Things don't have to be one genre sometimes. It is like a mashup, but I definitely am a more entry-level person. I do not like gore. I cannot watch body horror. It is not something I enjoy. I do not judge those things. They're just not for me. They are not meant for me. And I do like movie violence. I just like it in the context of action movies, things that are meant to excite. When things are bloody or violent out of meaning to upset, I do not enjoy that. And to each their own. I know a lot of people love that stuff. This is the kind of horror that I adore. Comedy horror has a special place in my heart. It works so well because scares and laughs are really the same mechanism. You build attention to then give the audience the release of laughter or scream. Maybe that's why I have a harder relationship with horror. I don't jump scare. I have been jump scared exactly one time my whole life, and that was watching Haunting of Hill House by Mike Flanagan. That is some stuff that I love. I love all Mike Flanagan stuff. I think anyone who is really into horror would laugh at the stuff I like. Not that Mike Flanagan isn't great, but it's not what a horror aficionado would think of. I definitely am someone who gravitates to the Conjuring series or, more tongue-in-cheek slashers like Scream, or I love Final Destination movies. That's where I sit in this world of movies. So I'm definitely not judging this on any merit of horror as if I understand the deep complexities of all horror movies. I just want to absolve myself. This is just purely a take from someone who's very entry level and really here for the comedy of these things. I think what I appreciate so much about comedy horror is tone. If anyone here listened to my Twister and Twisters episode, I really adore a 90s sensibility of filmmaking. The camp that existed in that era of film is what I like. And camp isn't about being so bad it's good. Camp is about committing to the absurdity of your world in a certain way. And I think horror comedies live and die by that. And I think in the now time of filmmaking, the horror comedy is probably something that has still stood away from this whole let's make everything rounded and gritty. That doesn't really work for this kind of movie. So it has kind of stayed away from that whole issue I have with everything becoming too grounded, too gritty. Some movies benefit by that. Horror comedies, I think, probably do not. So tonally, this movie is something that I adore. I, of course, always want to talk about world building because it is so important, especially in movies like these. I think this did a very John Wick, very good job of establishing a very small contained thing in the first one and then blowing up the world to a larger extent and escalating everything. And I think the reason why these two movies are remarkable is because I really do feel like they are on par as being just as good as the other one. I think the first one, I really enjoy the contained world of this one family, one household, one place, while the second one really takes that to the nth degree of what world was this family a part of? So we go from one family to many families and the structure of their cult and their organization, and it controls the whole world. So even if it's still one property, the property itself is bigger and there's just more characters, more dynamics. Everything was more, but not in that way where sometimes because you're in the sequel world of, okay, now let's take this and make it bigger. And a lot of things kind of lose their feel by doing that. This one still really nailed the same tone and just is probably less claustrophobic than the first one. I think that's why the first one still has my heart a little bit. Like there's something so closed in about the feel of that one, where this one, even just the nature of how they shot it, a lot more outdoor, drone, big sweeping crane shots and whatever they used to get all these big shots and the big golf course and being outside. There was just a lot more external use of space. And then you get the externality of just all these families coming from different places, different locations, different ethnicities, different backgrounds. So it just feels a lot more open as a world, but not in a way where it lost touch with the feeling of being hunted, which, this is a movie that is just a pile of villains and a final girl and then two final girls. So even that was multiplied. It was like, we gave you one final girl and now we're going to give you two final girls, and also nailed it on that execution. So that's my number 3 thing that this movie excels at. So we've got tone, world build, and casting. My goodness, the casts on these movies are so good. I mean, Samara Weaving, just based on her screams, this primal, shrieking banshee yell that she does. I want to do it. I want women to do it. I'm so here for it. I just want to do that and release a lot of energy. I am someone who, if I'm super upset, it has to get pretty bad, but, I'm going to share some personal things. I do love to scream in a pillow. It is a very, very good way to just let out your frustrations, and your whole body just calms down right after. Because if you really do one of these screams, like do a Samara Weaving scream into a pillow the next time you're upset, and come back to me and tell me you don't feel physically better at the very least. I love watching her. I think she's a great final girl. I'm rooting for her. She's good at the comedy. I actually am not super familiar with her work, and I really kind of named this episode Here Comes the Bride, not just because it works with Here I Come, but because of that moment in Ready or Not 2, where she's in the hospital and sort of superhero suits up again in her wedding dress that is all caked in blood. And I feel the discomfort of putting that on, but I also love that she had kind of like a superhero moment where I'm going to get my fighting gear back on and here we go. I really felt like it was making like the bride the hero of this movie. It's very superhero in the setup of it's a bunch of villains and one person to really fight back. And that's kind of why it works to bring the sister along. It's like kind of Batman and then Batman and Robin in the second one. So I really felt like the moment of her putting on the dress was so important. I even like the dialogue excusing the fact that why would you want to do that? Like, just there, if I logic this, I will never logic this kind of movie. Not really. I laugh at the idea of logic because if it were applied, you'd say, you know what? Just hit the scrubs room. Like go to a space in the hospital where they put the scrubs and put those on. Like that would be a way better thing to fight in, probably. And who wants to put clothes on that are soaked in blood? But I do appreciate the costume department and the way that it just got more bloody, more red, and then by the end, she's just in a very maroon, dark, blood red dress. I cannot mention casting without touching upon the genius of putting Adam Brody in the first movie. Adam Brody is such excellent horror movie casting because he's just Mr. Likeable, as far as I'm concerned. I am hard pressed to find people who do not like Adam Brody. And I say this as someone who has no particular attachment to him. I think a lot of people in my generation grew up watching him as Seth Cohen, and that's why they feel that way. I have never seen an episode of The OC. It is a gap of mine, a willful gap. As a huge Phantom Planet fan who's been to, I actually don't know how many Phantom Planet shows I have been to. If you don't know who Phantom Planet is, they are the band that sings California, which is the theme of The OC. So it's funny for me as someone who has listened to that song for decades and has never seen that show, and that's people's point of reference. I feel like that's a lot of people's point of reference for Adam Brody. I think my point of reference for him as a younger person was Gilmore Girls. I hope I'm not wrong about this, I would be so embarrassed. He was Lane's boyfriend, and even then, he was Mr. Likeable. He was the perfect teen boyfriend. And I just think it's so brilliant to put him in these kinds of movies. I know he did Jennifer's Body, which I have a really hard time remembering a lot of that movie. It's not one of my faves, but I do remember that he was probably my favorite part because even when he's being awful, he's weirdly likable. And I really appreciated in the first one how they used him playing type and against type, and you never really knew. There were times where it seemed like he was going to kill her, times where he was helping her, and you were kind of unsure until the end which way it was going to go. Obviously, he ends up being the best of the family and being her only ally. I do feel like the first movie, you have to give her somebody who's actually going to help her, and it's not going to be her husband, Alex. It is a little bit in the beginning, but I will touch on Alex a little bit later. But I think it's so brilliant to have that play with an Adam Brody where he's the reluctant son and in the end does the right thing. But even when you're doubting him, I still find him incredibly likable. So great casting there. And there's a lot of great casting in the first one, but then the second one happened, and Ready or Not 2 is just incredible. I mean, to have Nestor Carbonell, Sarah Michelle Gellar, David Cronenberg, Sean Hattie, Elijah Wood, it's insane. Actually, the moment where Sarah Michelle Gellar and Sean Hattie and David Cronenberg and Elijah Wood are all in the same room, it's just like, wow, that's a lot of 90s horror movie references for me. It's just so exciting, especially exciting on the whole Buffy front. I was super obsessed with Buffy as a teen. It was my entire personality for a while. It's all I cared about. I definitely couldn't believe I was watching her stake somebody. I can't tell you how much I appreciate these directors for giving her that moment and letting me watch Sarah Michelle Gellar put a stake into somebody once again all these years later. Elijah Wood is incredible. I think that the lawyer is my favorite character, which is kind of unfair because it's one of those like side characters that it could never work as a main character. This is kind of like touching upon the night shift conversation for the pit. I just like this character too much. There's something about this stoic, almost disinterest in the outcome. He's just here to get a job done. He has to execute the letter of the law of this book, and that's all he's here for. I did see a cast interview where someone was like, I think he's really old, like intimating that he was immortal and ancient, and this was his deal with the devil or Mr. LaBelle. And I did like that idea that he's just been around forever and he's just here to get things done. He does seem like a no BS kind of person, and his just entire attitude and the way that Elijah Wood played it. Because again, this is someone who's so likable and he's got that very sweet face, but he's also just doesn't care and isn't on anyone's side. I don't know that he cares who wins because everybody he deals with is awful. All of these people are awful. So it's not like he's really going to care which ones of them win. I don't even think he cares if she wins. And he's so likable that I gotta be honest, guys. I hope this doesn't make anyone uncomfortable, but every time that he said Hail Satan and they join in the chorus of repeating him, I did join in the chorus. I couldn't help myself. I was like, yes, Elijah, you tell them. And then, of course, there's Sean Hattie, who once again is being cast in this way that I feel like directors like this actor because he can strike a real crazy balance between being endearing and terrifying. And I really enjoyed the Titus reveal over the movie because he is sort of sympathetic in the beginning when his dad hits him, when his sister hits him. He doesn't really seem all that dangerous. In fact, on rewatch, listening to, I forget the character's name, but she calls him a psycho and says his sister won't be able to control him. And it almost feels out of pocket when she says that because you're like, he doesn't seem that crazy. But obviously she's correct. Obviously she knows things we don't know yet. And the reveal of how psychotic he is, I think, is just excellent. And I see why people want to cast him for this kind of stuff because it's a huge skill to play both those things in one character. There are definitely actors who can play endearing and play psychotic, but to play endearing and psychotic, in one thing is pretty impressive. I think Titus and Alex, to me, stand up as the real baddies of these movies because there's so many villains. Everyone's a villain except for her and her sister. And even the lawyer, in a way, is a villain. But, you've got a lot of layers of true believers versus these people who are just trying to do things for their own survival. I feel like the first movie, the only really true believer is Helen. And I do wonder, it's not, again, I wouldn't apply logic. It's not a plot hole. I'm not judging, but it's kind of funny in the way that in the first one, they don't really seem certain, but everyone in the second one is very certain. So it kind of makes me wonder, like, did they miss meetings where this stuff was happening in front of them? Because everyone in the second one seems very certain that you will explode. They're not shocked by it the way that they seem to be in the first one, but I'm okay with this. It just feels like one of those things that, oh, they didn't really think about the sequel the first time, so it doesn't matter. But my point is, there's layers of how invested they are in actually wanting to kill her, especially Daniel not being a villain in the end. But for me, Titus in the second one, obviously the psychotic, terrifying villain beating her sister within an inch of her life, this crazy line of, you're just a collection of organs, really just dehumanizing these women in front of him. And even Nestor Carbonell, I think, has a great line that also gives you a window into how these people think, where he says, this thing doesn't even care about that thing. But I think even as terrifying and outwardly villainous as a Titus is, the real villain of both the movies is Alex, her husband, because he's that villain that, even though Titus, you don't know right away he's psychotic, he's just blatant. He wants to hurt somebody. He is sadistic. Alex is so much more insidious. He's Mr. Nice Guy. And I've always said, there's nice guys and there's good guys. Nice is what you do when people are watching you. Good is what you do when you have integrity, because integrity is what you do when no one can see you. So Alex isn't really a good guy. He's just wanting to be some image of what he has in his head is better than his family, and is using Grace to achieve that feeling. And it's really that kind of terrifying thing of the real horror of the first movie is that kind of love of, I need to possess you. The second he says that line of, you're not going to be with me, are you? And he turns on her, it's that, if I can't have you, no one will kind of love. And it's scary on a very real level, where, like, the scariest thing to me that happens in both movies is actually that nail going through her hand. That is, like, very body horror adjacent. Like, it's too real. It's something that could actually happen to you, and I don't want to see it. But yeah, that's another thing that could really happen to you, is that you could love somebody who cares more about possessing you than what's good for you, and ultimately leads to her almost dying. Because if it hadn't been for Daniel, Alex would have just let her die. Like any good horror, I think horror has always had a really great reputation for actually having important social commentary. And even something like this, a comedy horror, is really calling out class warfare, rich versus poor, and family dynamics. And I really love the way that the only people who really love each other as family are Grace and Faith. All the rich people hate each other in most ways. They don't really value their family. There's a little bit of value in the first one between, like, the mom and Alex and the dad and Alex. They want him, but there's this falling out. There's no good relationship really in these family dynamics of the rich people. And the only people who really choose each other are Faith and Grace, or are willing to give up their own well-being for the other one out of love. Because obviously Titus strangles his sister, which is like a terrifying scene, to be honest. I would not want to have to marry that guy after seeing that. To wrap it up, I will say that I do agree with how this ended. The ending is perfect. I think you want to have the big blood explosion in the end. We get to see this running gag one more time with Elijah as the lawyer shielding himself and his book from the shower of blood. I love that he successfully doesn't get bloodied the entire movie. He's just too well versed at this. But I will also say that I don't adore her logic because I feel like this is the railroad problem. Is that what it's called? I don't know. That question of, would you divert a train to run over one person if it saved 5 people from being run over? You are actively going to make the choice of killing that one person to save the 5 people. This is a moral ethics dilemma question that's asked, I think, in like a lot of philosophy classes and exercises. And the reason I say that is because she doesn't want to sell her soul. Totally fair. And doesn't want to sacrifice goats or have to like randomly kill someone the way they have to with her once every whatever few decades this happens. Because I think the last time SMG's character says it happened in like 1963 or something. So it's not that often. But this power she gives up does come with running the whole world and being able to stop entire wars from happening. So I just think maybe you should take a beat and think about saving millions of people and using the power to control the whole world, I think is worth just taking an extra 5 minutes to think about, especially when Titus is dead. You don't even have to be married to this scary guy who just murdered his sister in front of you. You can just have the power, and that's it. And I don't know, it feels worth it. I say this all in jest, really, just because that's how my brain works. I watched that and I was like, is she a better person than me? Because I would have considered this for like 1 second longer. But I do think it's the right ending for the comedy. And I do think the comedy maybe wins everything in this movie. It is actually funny. I remember I laugh really hard when the kids explode in the first one because she starts giggling too, and I just find it hilarious that they have the kids run off camera and then it's just an explosion off camera because you probably like don't want to have kids die on screen, like that's too much, but they are awful enough that if it happens off screen, it's funny. So, yeah, I would say it's the perfect ending to have all the baddies explode down there in that pit, but I would have liked her to run the world because that would have been cool. And now she's just like this chick with a goat. And I don't know what you're going to do with a goat because I got to tell you guys, goats are not easy. Like, I know a lot of people want goats, but like, I don't know where you're going to put that thing. You live in Chelsea. Anyway, I love these. If you listen to this and haven't seen them, crazy, but like, love you. Go watch them. If you enjoy them as much as I do, I'm happy you're here. I think I'm headed into either doing The Librarians movies. So The Librarians was a show as well, but Librarians were these made-for-TV movies with Noah Wyle. I could use a rewatch of them because I've been watching a lot of John Wells content. And, you know, with all the respect and admiration and complimentary meaning behind this, the dude is like bumming me out. I mean, I just watched Southland for the first time because I kind of want to do it for the podcast now that I've done The Pit and Animal Kingdom. And it's a bummer, y'all. And I think, you know, if I did Librarians, it would be at least like a levity moment where we could talk fun B movies made by Noah Wyle that are just a good time. So I might do those next, and then I might consider doing a Southland rewatch for the podcast. I always say I can't guarantee what I will end up watching because I can't guarantee what my hyperfixation brain will grab onto and binge watch this next week. But you stay cool. I'll see you next time.